Well, this is a real joy for me that I can welcome two great banjo players, Steve Martin and Alison Brown, to the show. They have a record out called Safe, Sensible, and Sane, and I'm so pleased to talk all things banjos and bluegrass. Alison Brown and Steve Martin join me now. How are you? Thanks for being here.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having us.
It's nice to have you.
Nice to see you, Tom.
Nice to see you too. Alison, tell the story a little bit. You guys found yourselves separately on vacation in the same place and started jamming together.
Yeah, it sounds kind of unexpected, doesn't it? But we both happened to have our banjos, and we knew each other through Steve's banjo board. So Steve just said, well, why don't you come over for lunch and bring your banjos? So we spent the afternoon sitting around playing banjos, and I was really entranced by the way Steve's clawhammer playing sounded next to my three-finger playing. But we just had a great time, a really inspiring afternoon swapping banjo ideas.
I'll do a quick translation for the audience. The three-finger style is what people would know as more like the bluegrass style of banjo, popularized by Earl Scruggs. If you think of dueling banjos and Foggy Mountain Breakdown, that's the three-finger style. The clawhammer style is an older style. It's often called frailing. It's dung jigga dung, often played with the fingers. So what Alison's talking about, there are these two kind of polarities of the banjo coming together in a really beautiful way. Steve, what do you remember about that jam?
Honestly, I was a little in awe of Alison's playing, and we had my banjo tuned to double C, which is now my favorite tuning. And it took me 60 years to finally go, oh, I like actually double C and clawhammer. That's what I'm better at. So that's, there was actually Alison's discovery that those two sounds sounded good together, at least us. I think it could go either way with different players, but we both have a inclination to play melodically and to play, the melody and not be too fancy. Although Alison can, of course, do as fancy as you ask.
Yeah.
But that's what I think. What links us is the emotional, melodic side of the banjo.
So Alison, the story. Sorry, go ahead. I don't mean to interrupt.
Oh no, not at all. I mean, I completely agree with that, and I just wanted to say before we got off the topic of three-finger and clawhammer that Steve is a banjo unicorn in the sense that he can play both styles really well, and most people, as you know, Tom, will pick a lane. Yeah. But Steve is really great at both styles, which is inspiring to me as a three-finger player.
I could never get it. I would play three-finger for, as you know, Alison, I play three-finger my whole life. I tried to learn clawhammer over the pandemic, and I bite my nails, so that sucked, but I just could not, I was trying to play Sail Away Ladies, and I could not get it.
Yeah, it is hard on your nails, but Steve is my inspiration, so I've been working on it. Last few years.
So the story is, Alison, you're working on this tune, Foggy Morning Breaking. You had the first part of the tune done. And then you call Steve Martin to work on the second part. Why Steve?
Well, I was actually writing that tune in double C, and I know that Steve likes that tuning. It's my favorite tuning now too, but it's atypical for the banjo because most of the time we're tuned to an open G. It's a little bit different for the three-finger style banjo playing, but I just knew he'd be perfect for it. I knew that the sound of his banjo would be perfect for it, so I got up the nerve to reach out to see if he might want to write a B section.
And Steve, what did you make of it now when you got that call?
I felt, I think I could do that. When I heard it, I just thought, I think I know where it goes. You have an imaginary place in your head where the song goes, and then you start to play it and work it out and have it make sense. And so it was a good teaming on that tune. It was perfect. It's the perfect sound for me. Alison's tune was the perfect sound for me to figure out what I would do.
I got a real kick out of Steve hearing the way you talked about. So that song went to #1 on the bluegrass charts. Mm-hmm. And I don't even know if I have a question here, but I don't know, man. You're very famous and you're very, very accomplished. And I just loved when I heard you talk about going to #1 on the bluegrass charts. It was true excitement. It was true love of that.
Listen, there's nothing like hearing your song on the radio. Especially for me, a comedian, to have a hit bluegrass song is kind of like a dream come true, because it just proves you're not an amateur or something, you know. And it's just kind of thrilling, you know. It's like, you know, if I go into a room of actors, you know, we're all kind of peers. But if I go into a room of bluegrass musicians, as Pete Wernick reminded me, he says, "You're the worst one there."
Yeah, yeah.
He didn't use the word worst, but I'm making it exciting for radio or television. And so, you know, there is this like achievement, a feeling of achievement when you, like, I couldn't have been more honored. We were nominated for Song of the Year at the IBMA, this song we wrote together, Alison and I.
So what I want to do now is just kind of go back to each of you and talk a little bit about your origins in the banjo. And Steve, you know, I think as well known as you are in playing the banjo over your life, you've gotten a lot of like, why the banjo? Why the banjo? And I was trying to avoid it. I did a lot of research to learn about you in the banjo. And I read about you loving the Kingston Trio and discovering the banjo that way. I read about David Lindley in Disneyland and him playing the banjo.
Yeah, David Lindley.
Really important to you. I read about the Dillards, you know, the great bluegrass band. But what I can't wrap my head around is a couple of things. And one of them is you were surrounded by people who played in bluegrass bands and ended up playing in bands. John McEwen, who you mentioned, becomes the banjo player and multi-instrumentalist for the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. His brother becomes your manager. Like, you made a record when the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band did the Will the Circle Be Unbroken record. You went in with those musicians and recorded. That ended up coming out on a record you made. But did you ever want to make your living as a banjo player in a bluegrass band? Like, was that ever a possibility you saw yourself way back then?
Well, you have to understand that I was not fully formed as a comedian at that time. At the time I picked up the banjo, I was doing a magic show.
Yeah.
I had some comedy. I was really throwing things in a pot so I could get enough time to be on stage. So stage was really my first love. And then you just sort of collect every possible thing you can do to make a show out of it. But just specifically about the banjo, when I saw Doug Dillard play, to me, it's like seeing a rock star take the place apart. And so that's a feeling that I kind of wanted to seek. It's to have that kind of thrill of being a rock star on stage. In this case, playing the banjo is completely misguided.
Did you ever feel hemmed in by the other things that you were known for? Like, did you want to play serious banjo earlier in your career, but you couldn't because you were Steve Martin, the comedian?
I felt the balance was just right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I did get more into it in the last 25 years. And because I knew that people who came to see me as a comedian, they're not coming to hear me play 10 songs, you know, they're coming to see a comedy act. And I think I played it enough just to say, he's good, he's competent. I didn't want it to look like a dilettante. And then when I started meeting more musicians, you know, you probably read this too, but when I started, I'd sort of not kept the banjo up. I always played it, but I didn't keep it up like you had to be a real top musician. And I went to Billy Connolly's castle in Edinburgh for a summer vacation once for a couple of weeks, and he's a banjo player. And I just got back into it, and he had this banjo made by Stelling. And I thought, that's a really good sounding banjo. And my memory of banjos being made, they weren't up to the quality that they used to be, and they just didn't sound very good. When I heard that banjo, I thought, okay, I'm going to get one. So I got one, and I had it, you know, delivered to my house in Los Angeles, and I literally picked it up out of the box and started playing The Crow, which is a song I wrote. And so I started just getting more into the banjo and started to remember the songs I used to play and started to write a few songs. And then I made this record. First I thought maybe I could be, the host of a compilation record, and I can play a couple of tunes, and then I can host this other and present other artists I really like. And then I counted up the songs, and I thought I had enough. I had enough for a record. And then I met the Steep Canyon Rangers, and then it all came together.
It's an amazing thing that sort of, like, again, later in life, you kind of came back to the banjo in that way and started taking. And I should point out for people who don't know, your sort of like rebirth as a banjo player publicly was playing on television on David Letterman's show with the guy who invented the three-finger style in many ways, like Earl Scruggs. You played
yeah.
Foggy Mountain Breakdown at a breakneck speed with Earl Scruggs. And that was sort of your return to playing the banjo publicly, which sounds nightmarish.
Well, it all happened because, Earl called. He was doing a 75th anniversary record, and he called me and said, "Would you play on the record, Foggy Mountain Breakdown?" I said, and I'm thinking, yeah, I think I could do that. And then I went down, and they already had the track recorded, and it was so fast, and it's all I could do to keep up with it, because I could play fast. I mean, in the days, I could really play fast, but this was so fast, and I thought, I'm losing it a little bit. I'm going to get it back. And so that that album won a Grammy, so I got a Grammy right over there for it, for banjo playing. It's like, I thought John McEwen must be so mad that I have a Grammy for playing the banjo. Anyway, and so that's what really got me back in, and that's maybe it connected with Earl that way too. And I'd met him before. John took me down to see him play in La Jolla.
Man, oh man. I think the point I'm trying to make here is that the grip that this instrument can have on all of us, and in sort of a mysterious way. So Alison, for people who don't know your story, I mean, you went to Harvard and you entered into this world of finance, and you entered into this world of banking, and sort of famously, mythologically in bluegrass circles, sort of stopped because you decided you wanted to follow the banjo. Was that a hard decision? Was that a tough decision?
Well, I'm not brave enough to make the decision kind of the way you're describing it. I was kind of like made it in baby steps, really. I spent about 3 years structuring tax-exempt bond issues for cities and municipalities that can issue tax-exempt debt.
Oh, cool.
And it's about as exciting as it sounds. And I just kept thinking, I realized that there were a lot of people that I was working with that would get up in the morning and get in the shower and think about bond issues. And I would get up in the morning and think about banjo. And the two things didn't really go together, because as soon as there was an inkling that I was thinking about banjo, then somehow there was work that needed to be done all weekend. It was one of those kind of jobs where you sell your soul to the firm. And so I decided to take 6 months off to see if I could write some music, because I really felt that I could make a contribution to the banjo through writing music more than any other way, more than just playing tunes that other people already played so well. So yeah, I gave myself that 6 months, and I was literally about to apply to law school when I got a call from Alison Krauss, and she needed a banjo player to fill in on a weekend, and that turned into 3 years. And
Wow.
then, I
I
came
don't
to
know
another
all these
fork.
stories.
Yeah,
This is great.
it's
Yeah.
yeah. So then I came to another fork in the road, and I was thinking about law school again. And then Michelle Schacht called, and she needed a band leader for her world tour that year. So I took that on, and then as that was about to end, Gary West, who's now my husband and co-founder of Compass Records, he and I were on that tour together, and we met a label in Australia that was looking for international distribution for their catalog, and we were thinking about launching a record label. So rather than going back into banking, another door opened that kind of kept the music thing alive for me. So I would say that I ate the elephant in a number of bites, not just one.
Did you? How do I put this now? Did you feel there aren't many women in playing banjo now? I mean, there's more than there ever have been. Steve mentioned the Stoneman family earlier, that he got to see, Ronnie Stoneman in that band, great pioneering women of the instrument. But Alison, did you feel that at all? Did you feel the only womanness of the instrument when you came into it?
Yes, very much so. I mean, when I was growing up, at jam sessions, people would say all the time, "You sure do pick good for a girl." That was like the thing you heard all the time. And, now a lot of time has gone by, and I don't think that people say that anymore, but it's taken a long time for there to be multiple role models, for women coming up playing the instrument and girls, to see like
And
other women playing the banjo.
and by
This
the
year,
way,
yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to say this year, 3 of the nominees for Banjo Player of the Year at the Bluegrass Music Awards were women. So that is a huge sea change from where it was when I started.
And simultaneously, this like starting to talk about the '60s, and you play good for a girl, but there were very few female comedians, and that has completely changed. It was an anomaly to be a female comedian. There was Joan Rivers, and there was a couple of Minnie Pearl. There were a couple, but it was still a male occupation, and both comedy and music are no longer male occupations.
I might even say that, Alison, you're a part of why that change happened more than you're an observer of it.
Well, I mean, we all stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, right? So, I mean, there was Ronnie Stoneman before me and Lynn Morris, and there just were fewer voices. But what I like to think about is the fact that Doc Watson and Ralph Stanley both would talk about learning how to play banjo from their mothers. And so I know that women were playing the banjo, they just weren't playing it on stage. And then if you go back a little further, at the end of the 1800s, the banjo was actually considered to be a lady's instrument, a perfect parlor instrument for the demure young woman. So maybe it's just getting back to where it needs to be, or where it was 150 years ago.
Before we listen to a couple of tunes from the records, Steve, to the other question I wanted to ask you that I couldn't quite find in the research is sort of the intersection of the comedy and the banjo, right? So again, I'm gonna lay out a bunch of stuff I found out.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna lay out that you were doing comedy and you were doing magic and you were doing everything you possibly could to entertain a crowd, and the banjo was part of it. I'm going to point out that comedy has a huge history in bluegrass music, especially with the banjo player, actually. Like George D. Hay, the guy from the lead announcer in the Grand Ole Opry, said famously about Earl Scruggs, you're a lovely player, but you ain't one bit funny, String Bean, Grandpa Jones, all legendary comedian sort of banjo players. But the way you used the banjo in your comedy was really interesting to me. When did you figure out that when did it go from, hey, I just need to do a bunch of stuff on stage to keep the audience occupied, to the banjo can become part of the comedy routine?
Well, the form that I grew up with was folk music. For example, Smothers Brothers. They sing, they play, they're funny. Every folk music act, Kingston's Trio, had humor. They did humor. It was just a part of it. And so I didn't see it as strange that, I wasn't a folk singer or anything, but to me, that was just the form, and then I realized, 50 years later, I'm doing exactly what I did. I'm playing the banjo and telling jokes.
You did say this thing to me one time. You and I talked before briefly with Martin Short one time, and you said this thing that's been resonating with me since then. I asked you, how do you get used to, when you're a comedian, you know you're doing a good job because how often you get a laugh. You get a laugh every 20, 30 seconds, and you know you're doing a good job. And you said something to me like, the hardest part of this is standing on stage playing my banjo and going 3 minutes without people reacting. Like going 3 minutes without people laughing. Do you have a recollection of that? And do you still find that?
I now I know how music is shaped. And so I know that when I'm at the point where I would say I need a laugh now, something needs to change in the music to keep the interest of the listener. And that's why there's bridges, and that's why there's choruses, and that's why you sometimes slow it down and do a fancy little break or something, do a little show-off thing, is just to keep the music alive, especially in live, because, it's hard to hear the lyrics. It's hard to hear individual instruments. And so I do like to, I've started to put lyrics on the screen behind me in certain songs, not everyone, but in certain songs. So the audience, it's an older audience, first of all, and so they can actually follow what we're saying. I try to have really good diction when my fake sing, and and I insist that the lyrics be on top for the audience so they can follow the story. The audience that comes to see Martin Short and I is not a bluegrass audience.
No.
We have to win them, with this music. So for me, if it was a bluegrass audience, I wouldn't care. Would just play. They know how the shape goes. They know the songs. But here, this is a completely new thing.
I'll point out that the last time we talked about, it was you and Martin. It was like a 5-minute thing, and you and I started talking about banjos, and Martin said these words: "Is anyone still listening to this? Would you stop talking about the banjo?" And I think that's what cut us off.
Well, that's his standard go-to put down for me. So
I want to listen to one of the tracks on the record.
Sure.
Dear time, on this fair occasion, I'd like to say you've given me more than what you've taken. Hey, time, working well together. I know it's not forever. We'll both be moving on.
It's Dear Time from the new record from Alison Brown and Steve Martin. That's featuring Jackson Brown and Jeff Hanna, who you might know as the singer of the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, with a song called Dear Time. Steve, we can talk in a second about like Jackson Brown being on it and all the intersections of that. But that song lyrically to me was a gut punch, man. Like it's beautiful and melancholic and gorgeous. Talk to me about where that song came from.
Well, first of all, thank you. When Alison and I started writing songs together, you start to get into a groove, and you can see a little pathway, like from Foggy Morning Breaking, an instrumental, to Bluegrass Radio, which is a lyric song celebrating the fun of having a #1 bluegrass song. And then we do a couple more instrumentals. Then you think, well, what else can we write about? And then Alison would send me instrumentals, and I'd sit and feel the vibe of the song and try to come up with lyrics. There's another song called Michael. I think that's a very clear example of me reacting lyrically to Alison's music. But Dear Time is the thing. Like, now you've got 8 songs. You need 12. And you think, what do I really know about? And one of those things is I was just turning 80. And I said, well, I should be able to write about being 80, or at least, or being 70, or being older, because it's something I know. I have to figure out, what do I know about it? And I was talking to Alison. I said, I have this idea for a letter to time, and it can't be depressing, and it can't be bitter, because our lives certainly didn't turn out that way. So that's what it led to. And once I figured out, a letter to time is the way to do it, because first you're thinking, okay, time, it's a thing that blah blah blah. It starts to get preachy.
Yeah.
And I didn't want it to be preachy, but a letter to time felt like it worked for me.
Look what I've collected, a little box of memories, somewhat disconnected, tied with twine, each a small remembrance, one inside the other. On rewind tonight I find them dimmed by wine.
And I hear what you're saying. It's not bitter, and it's not sad, and it's not depressing. It made me, I know there was a lyric in there about, like, if I could just, go back and hang out with my mom and dad, or like throw a ball for the dog. It was touching to hear you write that way. As someone who knows you from comedy, it was in your book,
Well, those 2 lines you cited were the lines I was most nervous about.
Why?
Because they could, will this come off as overly sentimental? As trite. And when we played it for people, nobody ever said, well, that's a little corny. You know, so I started to feel really comfortable with, and then you start to feel, yeah, it's exactly right. It's really, I like that now. But
It's a beautiful song. Steve mentioned another song on the record. Can we just play that one and talk to Alison about it?
This year was not such a good one. This year I'm bad out of luck. I'm headed down on the downslope. I can't figure out how to get it unstuck.
That is a great song. That's Michael, sung by Aoife O'Donovan and Sarah Jarose, two members of the great group I'm With Her, on Safe, Sensible, and Sane, Alison Brown and Steve Martin's debut record. So Alison, yeah, I mean, Steve mentioned this is a good example of how things came together. Talk to me a little bit about this song.
Well, that one started off as a banjo tune, and I really was imagining that it was just some kind of newgrass banjo instrumental. And I couldn't really fathom how you could add a vocal part and lyrics to it. But Steve just heard it, and the thing that's maybe the most interesting about this whole project to me is kind of how, another banjo player, it was intuiting like lyric opportunities in banjo music, because Steve can hear the banjo in the way a banjo player does, not in the way most people do, which is just like a bunch of notes. And so he was like really writing to the cadence of the instrument. And the story that he came out with is just a great story in and of itself, but the way it sits with the music, to me, is almost magical. I think it's probably my favorite track on the record.
Also, I find a real joy in following the melody of the banjo with the lyric, because that already creates something unusual. And I mean, Alison at one point said, well, we can trim that up. I said, oh, no, let me try to find those words that extend over the line. Like, it's just thrilling to do that, because it's always unexpected.
Is it a true story, that the story in that, Steve, the guy who
Not
starts a restaurant?
even,
All right.
Nothing to do with the truth. But I would say there's a general truth in the idea of that person that makes you come alive. Like this theoretical character of Michael, the person you call, he's only here for a day. Let's get together.
Alison, this is the Canadian show. This is the CBC. And in my research, and we didn't talk about this, I don't think, when you and I met before, that you won the Canadian National Banjo Championship. What?
Yes.
And it led to, it was a big moment in your career. Tell me about winning the Canadian National Banjo Championship, because you're not Canadian.
No, I'm not Canadian, but I've really liked the fact that people have mistaken me for Canadian because of that for many years.
She looks Canadian, if you think about it.
She feels like, she talks
absolutely.
Canadian, and she's very generous and kind. Yeah, you're kind of
Yeah,
Canadian.
am I polite enough to be Canadian?
Yeah,
Well,
you
my
are.
thinking was, oh, thank you. My thinking was I was really hoping to get into Harvard, and I thought if I could win the Canadian National Banjo Championship, maybe I'll get in. And so we
That
drove up
doesn't make sense.
It doesn't, but it worked.
Yeah.
It shouldn't work, but it does. So we drove up to Durham, Ontario, and I entered the contest and met a bunch of wonderful Canadian banjo players in the process. And yes, I get to carry this wonderful legacy of confusing people that I might be Canadian.
I didn't know that winning the Canadian National Banjo Contest could help you get into Harvard. I think you just inspired
Was
a lot
it
of.
because you won money or what?
No, I think it was just one of those like resume items.
Oh, okay, yeah. Right.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I had this GPA, I was this, and I happened to have won the Canadian National Banjo Championship.
Right, exactly. They say do something that no one else did.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, that could be good. Luckily, you
She
weren't
wrote
there that
down
year, Tom.
Banjo, field, and track were her areas of expertise.
Steve, last question for you is there's a lot of people who love this music, and what you want to do with it, or what you've done for it, is the thing I'm most interested in this question. Like you're a great banjo player, but you're a supporter of this music. There was the Banjo Prize that Alison's on the board of, that you started. I mean, you were bringing people like Noam Pikelny, one of the great banjo players, out on stage with David Letterman in front of millions of people. You hosted the Bluegrass Awards, with Alison. you're not just a player. You obviously do things to foster this community and to promote this music. Why is this music that important to you?
Well, when I came back in, I don't know what, there must be a term for that. Coming back, I don't know, in a reignition, that I was so impressed with the people I met. When I didn't really ever leave, but let's call it leaving. The Earl Scruggs was here,
top of the line,
and everybody else is like here,
low.
And then when I came, not low, good. And there's a big difference between Earl Scruggs and a lot of people. So now when I come back in, the average player is here, and the really good players are in the stratosphere. So I realized that changed, that the people got so much better. And I think a lot of it's because of Alison, a lot of it because of Bela Fleck, transforming the banjo and its sound. And so when I'd sit, I remember being backstage watching Noam play. And at the time, this is, I don't know, 15 years ago, and he was still paying off his banjo. And I remember thinking, these artists are as good as classical musicians, and they need some kind of something. And so my wife and I, Anne Stringfield, figured out maybe this prize would do something, but mainly I was just knocked out by the high level of skill and musicianship.
It's a lovely thing, man. Like, I don't even know if I have a question, but like, it's a lovely thing to see someone not just really like dig the music, but want to help it and want to help the people in it. It's
funny, you don't think of yourself as a benefactor. You just do it because, hey, you're so good. Come on, come play out here. Watch. It's when I was in college and I was, taking my speech class. It wasn't that I wanted to hear my sonorous voice. It's that I wanted people to hear T.S. Eliot, or Carl Sandburg, and say, just listen how great this is. So I don't know. There's no ego involved. It's just like something you just go, they're so good, listen.
But at the same time, I mean, it's the validation. I think, the banjo's been kind of marginalized sometimes and sidelined and has the negative connotations that kind of go with the hayseed image that some people may still associate with the instrument. But I think when someone like Steve shines a light on it, then all of a sudden people look at the instrument in a different way. And that validation for bluegrass music and for the banjo has just been really tremendous.
I think a lot of people were forced to take it seriously when Steve sort of came back on the scene and started bringing it out. And I think, and musically, the treatment of the banjo as a serious melodic instrument is done certainly like advocacy-wise through the stuff we're talking about, but musically on this record, like just the instrument is treated so sensitively and so beautifully and melodically, and the songs are great. And
I agree, and thank you for saying that, but I don't think you especially have to like the banjo to like this record. It's just there.
That's what I mean. You don't need to like the guitar to like Segovia. Like, you can just like the music. It's just treating the banjo like any other instrument here, and it's beautifully done. So thanks so much for your time, and thanks for the record.
Thank you, Tom.
I'll close with something Pete Wernick told me one time. He said, when I talk to people, he was talking about the esoteric quality of the banjo and how its borders are not broad. He just said, when I play the banjo for people, they say two things. They say, wow, I've always liked the sound of the banjo. And two, wow, is it heavy?
Heavy in a couple of ways, too. Steve, Martin, and Alison Brown were my guests. Their debut. Thank you so much for being here. Their debut album, Safe, Sensible, and Sane, is out everywhere on October 17th.
Album. I never thought of it that way, but you're right.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much.